So thank you guys so much. As Lisa said, we're really excited to talk through the changes that are happening with diversification on platforms and how brands are looking to move to more of an omni-channel model. And I think one of the things that's really important is to talk about how we've been diversifying our media plans and what things are going. And I know we have a short time, so we have three incredible panelists, but I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves kind of each as we run through questions. And I think one of the big things and what's been on everybody's mind is to talk a little bit about the iOS 14 changes. And with more people opting out of tracking and moving to a cookieless environment, what does that mean for brands, and how does that change your brand's KPIs, or should it? And I think I'm going to kick this off. Andrew Kim, who's the Director of Media and Analytics at Walker & Company Brands, if you want to get us started on some thoughts with iOS 14 and a cookieless environment.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so as Kristen mentioned, that we are I'm Andrew Kim, Director of Media and Analytics at Walker & Company Brands. Yeah, so as we think about just kind of iOS 14, the impacts that we've seen, I think just over the weekend we saw that I think 96%, right? I think that was the first initial number, is that 96% of consumers have opted out of being tracked across that mobile of Facebook, right? And so we knew going into this there was going to be an impact. We heard, varying degrees of different numbers. We heard 80% we're going to opt out. We heard 70%, right? But it feels like the first indications are there's a good majority that opted out. And so we, started looking at kind of how we would approach this. And we saw that last year, right? And so as we looked at all our channels and kind of the performance that we saw, email was starting to decline. And we've seen this decline over the, not only at Walker Company Brands, but like over the course of the last few years, the email open rates, click-through rates, conversion rates have all been declining, not to a degree where it was initially alarming, but if you look at the time horizon over the past few years, that's kind of what we were looking at. And then additionally, as Gmail and kind of the main email providers came up with had the promotions tabs, we saw that those emails our promotional type emails were being diverted into that mailbox. And so we continued to see those types of open rates continue to decline. And so what we thought, and we saw from our analytics, was that about 80% of our consumers and transactions were occurring on mobile devices. And so how could we find additional channels and create this data mode of first party data that we could use to enact and grow our consumer list, right? And so the avenue, this is kind of, this is not an advertisement in any way, but like, it's funny, I didn't know that Attentive was going to be the prior presenter or key presenter prior to what we were going to say presenting. But yes, SMS is a channel that we have prescribed into, we've tested into, and we saw it has been very, very successful for us. And having that one-to-one communication, I think as a part of marketing, has always been something that that marketers have desired, right? And so I think SMS and being that close to pocket and that close to that communication with our consumers has been extremely successful for us, whether it be through brand marketing, whether it be through promotional messages, or even just different types of engagement, right? And so we just decided like that is something that we want to test, and we've seen some great success with it. So as we continue to build our data modes, we're rethinking the role of the channel, right? And so as we think about Facebook as a primary conversion channel, which it was, and it continues to still be, the way that we measure it and the role of that channel is slightly shifting, right? So do we focus more on customer acquisition through and development through our SMS channels and email channels that we have that one-to-one communication, or do we use Facebook as more of an email gathering or a customer list gathering type of channel? And so we are testing into all these different types of scenarios with Facebook and with our different acquisition channels, because this cookieless environment isn't a unique problem to Facebook, right? And so we've been dealing with this problem for the past 3, 4, 5 years as privacy concerns have continued to rise. And so, I think Facebook is one of the larger players in the space, which puts marketers, which makes marketers uneasy, but therein lies the challenge, right? So as marketers, the challenge never stops, right? So we need to continue to iterate and learn, and SMS and one-to-one marketing is something that we've continued to develop and iterate on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. I really appreciate it. Amy, I know as the head of Media Tax Act and being kind of a really virtual platform, I'm sure that there's some big changes that you guys have seen due to iOS 14. And as Andrew noted, even prior to that with, the privacy and data, I would love, some perspective from you on how that's changed your strategies.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting time. And yes, just to introduce myself, Amy Bartle. Actually, like John, my last in-person media post was Kiowa Island. So nice to see you all again. But yeah, I actually joined Tax Act back in August, hired remotely, onboarded remotely, hired a team remotely. And, as we're in the process of in-housing all things media, but Facebook has an interesting role for us in, I'm sure none of you ever said, let me do my taxes on my phone. So this balance of the really rich platform Facebook has been in terms of reaching prospects primarily through an initial mobile touch, more Apple than Android, younger than what we acquire through our other channels. We've really watched this upcoming change with a lot of trepidation. Certainly the first couple days after the rollout came out, it did seem like the Facebook data infrastructure fell apart for a little bit. Data wasn't settling. We weren't seeing any changes in data settling. That seems to have calmed down a bit. And so, thus far for us is within the basic core Facebook conversions, we do seem to be able to continue to get some of the initial information we need. And Facebook will continue to provide value to all of us, whether it's in terms of things like their lead gen ads, as Andrew commented about ways to capture emails and the like, and their function in the brand space. But I think for us, the one thing that we were very happy to get done this year is for the first time in my career, I actually was able to do a true incremental test on Facebook using your classic PSA versus your own ads. And so we now have internally what our benchmark number is in terms of incrementality from Facebook. And so just as we adjust and go through our total media mix and identify how we want to deal with attribution going forward as all platforms change, that'll just be another weapon in the arsenal. But we do find over and over is you're just getting up to the very top level metrics and losing any richness of data we had before.
Yeah, I think it's a struggle we're all facing is that richness of data. I think one of the other things that we want to talk about with diversification is, obviously a lot of this is about online changes and what's happening, but I think as the world is opening again, real brick and mortar is coming back and people are beginning to think about getting back to stores and what does that look like? And I think we all are hoping the world has changed a little bit. So I would love, Allison Hopp, you're the VP of Commerce at Ministry of Supply, and I know we chatted a little bit about the changes in the retail landscape, and I would love to hear a bit about how you guys are coming back to brick and mortar and changing really what that looks like for consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Allison. I'm our VP of Commerce at Ministry of Supply. So hopefully can give a little bit of a brand perspective as well, which is always a little different. We're a Boston-based clothing startup company, really focused on kind of performance and scientifically backed apparel, which is great. So as many brands did, we closed our brick and mortar retail stores last year, and we're taking an entirely different approach to working on reopening them. And that's not unrelated to kind of this topic at hand, even in ties, directly to the iOS 14 updates in some ways too. As we approach kind of internally what those iOS 14 updates meant for us, we really decided to take kind of a two-pronged approach with hard and soft techniques, right? So hard techniques, including things like backing up our conversion APIs on site, investing further into our remarketing and kind of retention funnels. But what it also meant from kind of a soft marketing perspective was taking bigger swings at different types of channels, varying the way that we think about things like social, the way that we think about things like partnerships, collaborations, maybe even placements that, the result and the return on some of that spend isn't immediately measurable. So we're actually taking a similar approach with our brick and mortar stores. So we are ramping up to reopen our flagship location, which is in Back Bay here in Boston. And whereas we would have previously approached it, right, like a sales channel, right, as kind of an equal counterpart to our website, with the penetration of digital spend last year, we don't want to take away from kind of what our online experience looks like. We want our store to be not in competition with it, but supporting of it. So we're really taking kind of a showroom approach. We're working on integrating more technology into our in-person experience. And we're taking big swings with things like not setting strict sales goals in our retail store, because we really want it to be kind of a marketing branch of the organization where customers can purchase in person if they would like to, but that we're also really facilitating those online touch points as well. So definitely approaching it a lot differently than we would have a year or two ago, but we're really excited for it and excited to see how the industry kind of changes around it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think one of the big questions that's come to the table is what it means about a KPI change for brands. You know, we always looked at, you know, really simple cost, you know, cost per engagement, cost per click, cost per conversion, all of that. And, you know, Allison, to your point, we're starting to look at how do we communicate better with our audiences. So I would love to, you know, kind of from each of you guys, Andrew, I can start with you again, is there new metrics that have been added to your kind of success metrics within the brand because of these changes or because of what we've seen happen over the last couple of years, and maybe some metrics that you would think would be good for other brands to maybe consider?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because we really look at, I think that the metric that we focus on really, I think, and at the end of the day, what all marketers really focus on is really sales, right? And so what is the net sales that we're generating? Because we're not creating these beautiful brand stories to just create them, right? I think there is an impact to the net sales that we want to have. And so the measurement of that is kind of what we're looking at and how that's going to differentiate kind of the marketing from just the different tactics from each other, right? And so what we really look at is the ratios between different KPIs. So when we talk about our CAC to LTV ratio, our CPA to LTV ratio, right? And so those are different ratios that we look at to make sure that we're not just looking at an efficiency metric or just a volume metric. We want to make sure that we're balancing those two out to ensure that if there's an opportunity to double down on a tactic that has additional investment opportunity, that we're not limited or hampered by any of our own KPIs. And so we want to make sure to have those ratios intact, right? And so what we generally look at, right, is a 3-to-1 ratio between CAC and LTV. And so that will give you a general baseline and tell you whether or not you're over or under invested in a specific channel, right? And so that's, I would say for us, it's more the ratios that we look at and not necessarily the hard ROAS numbers or hard CPA numbers.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Amy, I would love to get kind of your perspective on the return and the KPIs that you guys are looking at, and maybe if there's any that you have recommendations on.
Well, and yeah, so an interesting layer within my career from hospitality to retail, now into taxes, which is, you know, essentially an online subscription service, is I have for, you know, the past decade plus overseen the entire media funnel from the linear TV to the paid search and everything in between. And, you know, one of the things that's most exciting about this space is that, you know, we as marketers drive value. We drive brand value and we drive revenue. And what I have seen is we are getting better and better about understanding that the former upper funnel branding media actually drives performance, and how we treat and interact our customers within those more traditionally performance media spaces also has an impact into our brand awareness and consideration. So one of the things I fight pretty hard for anytime I go into a new company, if I don't have one, is to get a mix model in place. Much like Andrew commented, it's not the hard number, it's the ratio. You know, in any company where you are spending across the funnel, and we put as much in offline media as we do in online, if not a bit more in online. And when you have those kinds of investments, to think that you're going to measure and respond to only half of them and pretend this other half not either doesn't exist or doesn't perform or doesn't interact is really challenging. And so to have the mixed model look to both compare and contrast to what you see from your in-platform measurements, but to have a better idea of what your all-in media ROI looks like, and then how you can grow that over time and grow your media stimulated contributions over time based on bettering your mix and effectiveness, really helps to position for longer term growth. And I think more reasoned tactical decisions in terms of media mix and choices.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. So before I turn it over to Allison to kind of provide your perspective here, this is going to be the last question from us is there. And then to the attendees, we'd love to get some of your guys' questions. So please feel free, either ping us in the chat or raise your hand so we can get a few questions answered as well. And then, yeah, Allison, if you want to let us know kind of what your new KPIs have become or anything there specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll change it up just a little bit. So we, while we, have not decided to ignore any traditional KPIs, what we have worked really hard on is kind of applying a human focused lens to a lot of those KPIs and kind of digging a little bit deeper to really understand what they mean. So for us, that's really because we know that like long-term growth and sustainability really comes from building a really beautiful product and having really happy customers who rely on us and really enjoy engaging with us. So we're looking at things like time in between purchase, right? So are we increasing the time in between, someone's first purchase, second purchase, and kind of subsequent? And what does that tell us, right? Does that tell us that we're providing something that has them covered for a full season and they're coming back on a seasonal basis? Or is there a reason for them to come back a little bit earlier? And we need to lean into that as well, because I think kind of human-centered design and marketing offering will be so important for us as we kind of remove some of those dependencies on kind of the addictive channels like Facebook, where you can see kind of the result right away. We also think about traditional metrics a little bit differently, like AOV. Which we're also using to kind of not just gauge, are we increasing it on a regular basis, but why is it increasing, right? Like, why is it changing? Why is it fluctuating? Can we use it as a marker to indicate whether or not, again, we're meeting customers' needs and expectations? Are we, we want to be a brand that kind of is present at every stage of your life, every stage of the day. So we really see things like cart size and AOV as representative of if we're doing a good job or not, and kind of getting you covered from start to finish. And then we've taken it's something we've always looked at, but we are taking an even deeper look into just general customer sentiment, right? So metrics that are run by our customer service team. We do a lot of kind of, again, soft outreach. So our CEO, Aman, one of the founders, sends a lot of emails from his personal email that just go to large groups of customers that are directly from him. And he gets a ton of responses too. So we spend a lot of time with our customers and then working on kind of quantifying what that feedback looks like also. Again, understanding that some of that organic growth is going to be so important moving forward. How can we kind of double down and invest on positive brand equity and customer sentiment and make sure that we hear them so we can meet them where they are?
Love that. That's great. Nikhil, got your question. So how are you measuring the halo effects of offline channels like TV on your online channels like search and social? Amy, I know you chatted a little bit about, the effects of traditional, and you guys are spending pretty much the same amount in traditional that you are in digital. So we'd love to know how that halo effect is happening. Are you seeing that result, and how are you measuring that?
So there's a couple different ways in. One, probably the most widely used to date has been, building out to a marketing mix model, which, depending on your resources and who you choose, can either be really great or really painful. The other thing that's come along so nicely in the industry is that, in particular, TV measurement to search. If you're working with an iSpot, an EDO, a TV Squared, they all have the capability to not only be monitoring your TV buy in terms of your web responses, in terms of correlating visits, starts, completes, purchases, where your KPIs are to the website, but you can also set up the tagging in such a way to be able to correlate and in some cases get to causation in terms of your TV to your paid search. I say TV is a direct response medium. You see an ad, you search for a brand, and you end up either in one of the search engines or on Facebook. I haven't found, because of Facebook and their refusal of third-party tags, found a way outside of modeling to get to that aspect. But certainly TV to search you can get for a lower cost monitoring.
Awesome. Andrew, would love to know kind of your perspective on there, with Walker and Company, on TV or traditional channels, just kind of in general, and how we're seeing halo effects there.
Yeah, so we take like our spend on just traditional channels like TV and radio are probably fairly small. We're mainly focused on D2C, and we have retail presence, and so I would say with the partnership of our measurement analytics folks over on the P&G side, we are running a few tests to see the impacts to our retail sales, right? And so we are doing things like lift tests and holdout market tests to ensure that some of our radio activations and the impact of how we activate in those markets are impacting retail sales. And what I mean by that is really, when we take a traditional CPG type approaches and activate across reach and frequency in those certain markets, what is the impact there versus, the more D2C focused metrics like increasing our frequency, like we're really trying to figure out and hone in what are the specific measures and KPIs that are driving the retail sales. Do we increase our frequency? Do we increase our reach? Do we increase our channel mix? And those are the types of questions and offline type of measurement that we're incorporating into our measurement to ensure that not only is our offline media helping kind of our kind of in-store sales, but what is the contributory impact to the other channels as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I think that puts us at our time today.
No, actually, we have hi Kristen, and hi. I want a special shout out to Amy. How you doing, Amy? It's been a while.
Oh, you don't know how happy I am to see you all again.
Amy was a regular at the Insider Summits for many years.
Oh.
A couple of quick follow-ups. Amy, you mentioned, and I've heard this before, and I saw Andrew shake his head, nod his head in agreement, that you're finding more and more that upper funnel efforts really have an impact on performance. How is that changing your marketing mix? Is that changing the way you're spending and the way you're measuring? So,
it's an interesting space. You have to be, I got to tell you, as a marketer who's fighting for budgets, you have to be really careful not to say this too loudly within your executive team earshot, because none of us wants to come out with a TV buy and suddenly have someone trying to do, measure it the same way you measure your search return. But, as I said, there are better tools now. I generally keep the conversations very carefully couched in terms of correlation as opposed to causation and unattributed. But certainly, whether it's from something of an eye spot or depending on your internal structure, if you have a data scientist on team, they can absolutely get your TV commercial logs, pull your search data, and run a quick analysis for you as well. So actually what I'm finding, I'm in a challenger brand again, TaxAct, TurboTax, guess who has 100% brand recognition and who doesn't? And so, we're using some of this leverage of the broader reach and the success in particular of the CTV in terms of touting the dual effects of brand lift and demonstrated site visitation to really help kind of push those dollars out of the more performance bucket and into the media that's able to do more multitasking.
And finally, a lightning round. One sentence answer from everybody. I hear everybody, I've been listening to this all year for the last 2 years. Brands talking about how they have to pump up their first party data in response to everything that's going on with lost cookies and walled gardens. What has been your most successful tactic in increasing your harvesting of first party data among customers? One sentence.
Andrew?
I'm gonna need some more time there, but yeah, I'll think about it and I'll pass it to Amy first.
So I cheat. We do tax returns. So not only do we have your email, we have everything else. But Steve, I'll also tell you, 5 years ago on a panel about personalization, I said, look, personalization works when you're authenticated on a site and in email, but contextual marketing works really, really well, and it's going to work 10 years from now. And I think we're right back there.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, what about you?
Again, I'll change it up and I'll say we have leaned so heavily into, again, building good brand sentiment that we are pushing towards or moving towards how do we get customers to opt in to giving us their data in the first place, right? Like from a brand perspective, we work with, several agencies who are working on kind of some of that upper funnel, true ROAS marketing spend, but we also really see it as our responsibility of like bringing more people into our ecosystem, getting more people to want to be engaged with us and want to be involved with us, and really believe that that's the way we're going to build kind of the strongest customer base we can.
Awesome. Andrew, you're out of time.
Sorry, but yeah. I think some of the things that we are doing right in this space is really enriching our first party data, right? I think that's something that beyond just email, right? So we work with our partners at P&G, with a project called Hair Code to ask different surveys to really enrich our first party data beyond what we currently get through just email and phone number and kind of purchase level data. Like what type of hair type do you have? What's your skin type? Stuff like that to really enrich our first party data to create those experiences and customize experiences for our consumers that are truly one-to-one instead of just kind of a blanket approach to all our consumers.
Guys, our 3 A's, Amy, Allison, and Andrew, thank you so much. And Kristen, for great moderating.